Elmer Carl Kiekhaefer got into the outboard engine business like a blind chicken finds a grain, as an old phraseology says. The intention was to produce magnetic separators for the dairy business. But after acquiring a small outboard company, his team founded 300 defective engines which they rebuilt and sold. They did such a good job that new orders piled up. Mercury proved itself as an engine builder even during World War II, when the government received chainsaws that were much more powerful than the competition. For Kiekhaefer, it was obvious that the interest for outboards was about to skyrocket in the late 1940s, and started developing twins and four-cylinders. There was a 20 horsepower 20 cubic inch Mark 25, a 40 horsepower 40 cubic inch Mark 55, and a 30 horsepower 30 cubic inch Mark 30. To this date, nobody really knows the real meaning of the nomenclature. But even the Mark 25 was a blast ride, as it set a speed record of 70 miles per hour in 1950. One of the remarkable engineering solutions at the time in 1957 was routing the exhaust through the propeller, a so-called propeller hub exhaust system, a patent that Evinrude first adopted but abandoned. Just for clarification, all these engines were two-stroke. Kiekhaefer decided to boost the reputation of the company by purchasing a NASCAR team. His attention moved more towards the automobile racing, but Mercury's chief engineer, Charles Strang, was not resting on his laurels. A mind-boggling idea had been shaping in his mind, so he put himself into work in secret. 3 twin-cylinder crankshafts merged together, 2 4-cylinder blocks with a chopped-off cylinder, and an automobile 6-cylinder magneto, the world's first outboard 6-cylinder. The project had been quietly developed until a working prototype could have been shown to the boss himself. Kiekhaefer laughed out loud, but then gave it a run. It speaks with authority. Build it. The performance was simply game-changing. Being heavily based on the smaller models, the all-new Mercury Mark 75 was finally introduced in 1957. It featured 10 cubic inches per cylinder and a set of 3 19mm carburetors feeding internal reed valves. These reed valves were Kiekhaefer's design and also served as main crankshaft bearings. As a result, the valves occupied space already necessary for the mains instead of mounting to an extension of the crankcase. Crankcase volume was now smaller, causing a high crankcase compression ratio and a power advantage over a comparable rivaling engine. The engine had a firing order of 164253. Back in the 50s, there was not a properly strong lever unit available, and a so-called direct reverse system was made. It basically means an engine always engaged with the prop, and whenever a reverse was required, the engine had to be restarted in an opposite direction. It was convenient enough for a short period of time, but then later replaced by a traditional shifting mechanism in the lever unit anyway. Guess why competitors called them dogbusters? The opposite engine run also meant that the water pump and distributor had to go with the opposite engine turning. At the time, Kiekhaefer found a piece of water in Osceola County, Florida, secretly regarded and today is still known as Lake X. The originally named Lake Conlin was a 3-mile long and 1-mile wide pond which Kiekhaefer decided to purchase and make it a testing location for ongoing and oncoming projects. A testing facility of sorts with a workshop and a motel for factory employees. The same place was chosen to test these engines to set a quality and safety precedent. 2 Mark 75s were put into trial to cover 50,000 miles, sailing day and night non-stop no matter the weather conditions. The event was supervised by the US Auto Club, and the outboard engines were meant to be certified to prove then modern outboard safety. being refueled on the fly. Pilots changed every 4 hours. After 34 days and 25 miles sailed, the engines were disassembled under supervision. Simulating an average 10-year ownership, no failing point was found, and so the same units were placed into new 2 boats to continue. Maintaining an average speed of 30 miles per hour, both Mark 75s did finish the 50,000-mile record after 68 days of sailing. Both engines were turned down and found to be well within factory tolerances. The outboard industry had been thriving after the war, and this proved the qualities of the then new modern engineering and the Kiekhaeffer Mercury products themselves. Today, the Mark 75 is known as the forerunner of the famous Tower of Power series. In 1957, the 1-liter Mark 75 also had an H version. One of the elements of the high-speed variant was open headers, resulting in 90 horsepower at the prop, which set a world speed record of 107 miles per hour in 1958. The Mark 78 carried an enlarged engine to 66 cubic inch or 1.1 liter and a power output of 70 horsepower. In 1960, Mercury changed the nomenclature and the 66 cubic inch became a Mercury 700, and a new 76 cubic inch was named the Merc 800. Besides that, the full gear shift system was also offered instead of the direct reverse that year. A major event occurred in 1962 when the 1.5-liter Mercury 1000 became the first production outboard to cross the 100 horsepower mark. Then came the 1100, 1250, 1350, 1400 and so on. And as the straight sixes get bigger in size, Strang once spoke about his concern to his mother. "Well, a large woman always wears a black dress. Why don't you paint the engine black?" And the Mercury's Phantom Black became a thing ever since. Considering Mercury had got the most colorful lineup among outboard companies in the 1950s, it was quite a change. The story of the Tower of Power continued for over 20 years. Many various versions were made, making up to 155 horsepower. The largest Tower of Power had as much as 1.6 liter. It was a completely different animal compared to the 1950s motor. However, the Tower of Power engine was slowly tamed down in favor of the new V6 series in 1976, with the final replacement of the 115 horsepower version by a 4-cylinder in 1987. What made the Mercury engines so different compared to the competition was the propeller power rating. While others rated their engines at the powerhead without the transmission losses, a Mercury outboard was a very different beast to the same HP-rated Evinrude or other up until 1980s, when Mercury switched to powerhead rating. They were tireless, spinning at 5,000–6,000 RPM all day long at wide open throttle, and exceptionally fast, especially with a chopper-style propeller. A man only reads praises about the Tower of Power on the forum threads. Its heydays are now deeply in the past, as it is much harder to service such an engine due to parts unavailability today. Never had a pleasure to drive an outboard engine ever, so please comment down below who can describe the feelings a Mercury 2-stroke can provide. Though, I suppose we all will agree that the 6-cylinder sounds incredible. Before the end of the video, there was one more interesting inline engine by Mercury made between 1989 to 1994. The nearly 2.1-liter Force 150 is not the famous Tower of Power, but with such a large volume and its 5-cylinder layout, the 1988 125 horsepower 4-cylinder derivative definitely is worth a mention. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers!